Bubbles, dark basement, scuttles, fingernails.
Hi witches, it's Rose. I'm about to head into an interview with Abrah Arneson about her new book, The Vessel, Women, Plants, and Contraception. But I wanted to make sure you knew where to find her. Abrah can be found at Abrah Herbs, spelled ABRAHERBS.com. And if you're looking for her book, it's on Amazon or there's a link on her website. Thanks. Hi witches, it's Rose. Abrah Arneson has been a practicing herbalist for the past couple decades, as well as running an herbal apprenticeship program here in the Ottawa area. And I've been enjoying her monthly online workshops where she's exploring the different body systems and the herbs that treat them. But why we're here today with Abrah is because she recently published a book, The Vessel, Women, Plants, and Contraception. And what's amazing about this book is that on one level, it's a deep dive investigation into the history of contraception in all its forms. But on another level, it's this deeply insightful story that takes what would have been a bunch of factual information, but you took those facts and you wrote them into compelling narratives that make readers want to turn to the next page. And in the process, you managed to touch on some really big topics impacting women today: women's reproductive rights, rape and war crimes, which has been coming to light more with the recent war in Ukraine, as well as looking at the medical system impacts on women's health. And I want to dig into all this with you, Abrah, but I need to ask you something before we start that I know listeners want to know. Do you consider yourself a witch?
Well, I was just texting with a friend of mine who we've had this conversation going for about 15 years. Yeah, so am I a witch? A lot of people call me a witch. Yes, I guess I am, but then it's hard for me to define that word. Like, what does that word, like, I'm a word person, so words are really, really important to me. And I'll tell you a story. When I was a student still, and I was in my fourth year of herb school, so I was going to graduate soon, and I wrote a paper. One of my papers was on herbs in long-term care. There was a conference coming to a city I lived close to that was going to be about new ways of doing long-term care. Like, this was like 20 years ago. So I submitted a proposal in my paper and they accepted me. So I was going to this conference in this big hotel in a major city in Canada to do this presentation on herbs and long-term care. So I get to the conference and, all the vendors are there and there's people milling about, mostly women. And there's this 4 ballrooms are open for the keynote speaker. So I go in, I'm sitting near the back where the keynote speaker is, and they introduce this doctor, and this doctor is really attentive to elder care and really caring, and he has a lot to share with us, and it's, really, this is such an amazing opportunity to hear this doctor speak. So the guy comes on the stage, and he drops his screen, PowerPoint goes up, and the first slide is a woman with green skin and a really long nose and a wart, pointy hat, and she's stirring a cauldron that says bubble, bubble, toil and trouble, and she has a black hat. And he says, herbs are witchcraft. Herbs are evil. Herbs are... And he just starts. And I got a migraine on the spot. So I'm careful using that word because of how people interpret it. I really am uncomfortable with labels all around. But Max Dashu, do you know this book?
Witches and Pagans? Sorry, what's his name? Max
Dusser, a woman.
No, I haven't seen that one before.
Witches and Pagans. It's women in European folk religions, 700 to 1100. It's a really beautiful book. And so she spends a good chapter defining this word and looking at the etymology of this word, which includes being able to bend, twist, move, also talk to the dead, offer wisdom, work with energies. Basically old European earth traditions. So if I look at her, yes, I'm probably a witch.
By that definition.
By those definitions. And
I think it's interesting that you've been following this path of herbalism and that people are calling you a witch, which are two areas that carry a certain amount of stigma that you have to get through in order to practice.
Yeah. So I also, I want to be able to speak to a lot of different types of people. And so I'm just careful how I present myself. I have a very personal life that's very private. And then I have a public life. And my public life is my public life. So I kind of try to stay in the middle of a lot of things.
So you don't alienate any audience.
Yeah.
Right. I was actually going to ask you that because I think I saw somewhere, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was the weaving originally going to be called, because you have 2 books, sorry, I should clarify. Your book that you published before The Vessel was The Weaving
Plants, Planets, and People.
But was it originally called Plants, Planets, and Women?
Yeah, but originally it was going to be Ancestor Medicine, Plants, Planets, and People, or Women. Originally it was just going to be Ancestor Medicine, I think. And then, yeah, so it kind of went through all these
stages of evolution.
Yeah, like my friend that I was just talking about, she was the one who helped me name that book. But we changed it to People because there are lots of stories about man in this book as well. But I shifted it to people.
I was going to say, because I know one of your journeys seems to have been finding a way to bring more women's voices to herbalism.
Yeah.
Or at least becoming more aware, bringing more awareness to the impacts women have had to herbalism. Is that accurate?
There's a lot of women who are doing a lot of work in that area. Like I'm certainly just a little piece of that. In the United States, women really had a big, Rosemary Gladstar, huge impact on bringing women's voices. Avina Ram, in Canada, Chantal Cabrera. There's a lot of women who have really brought forward. Yeah, the work I've done is so small compared to what they've done. But that's a big issue in herbal medicine. It's getting better and better all the time, but that's been an issue, like the silencing of women's voices.
The first chapter starts with the witch trials.
Yeah.
Which, for me, from my perspective, because I'm a practicing astrologer as well, so we see similar trends in the sense that for 2,000 years, all the books published were by men.
Yeah.
Same with herbalism. And I often think about the fact that women's knowledge is often an oral tradition.
Yeah.
So it's passed from mother to daughter or grandmother, whichever. Whereas men's knowledge is often books.
Yeah.
And we weren't given the opportunity to read or learn, or the leisure time.
Yeah.
I wonder, for you, what do you think were the impacts from the trials on your own practice? Do you think there was a lot lost during that time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things, herbal medicine is a very pragmatic kind of medicine. It's a medicine that my garden is full of medicinal herbs. It's not, like, it can get extremely complex. Like, I don't want to simplify it. But it also, there's so many ways that every woman can use herbal medicine without having to be a full-blown, clinical herbalist. It's a very accessible kind of medicine. By taking it and putting it in a special place, these are the books. This is the herbalist. This is the person who knows. It's taken it out of the culture. We don't really have herbal medicine in our wider culture. It's not really a thing. It's quaint. It's kind of a hobby, but actual people who practice herbal medicine for the health of many people, that's very rare. Yeah, I think it was really detrimental. And plants give themselves freely. So that whole relationship, the commerce of herbal medicine, if everybody knows how to grow some herbs for colds and flus, then that knocks out a huge industry.
We don't need the medicine. I was thinking that because I know they're trying to bring through new limitations or barriers to herbalists in the US, which is interesting coming along with both your book and the Roe versus Wade situation, where it's interesting how it's all arising at the same moment, where we're preventing women from controlling their own bodies. And then we're looking at other ways that women could do it, such as herbalism. And suddenly there's barriers being created there too, which plays along so much with the stories in your book.
Yeah. Well, good luck to them, right?
Yeah, because you can't stop plants from growing.
Yeah,
right?
and you can't stop women's uteruses,
from doing
trying to have some kind of say over whether they're pregnant or not.
It's interesting looking at natural contraception in the way that you were mentioning that you have to know your own cycle.
Yeah, you have to know your body.
Working with herbalism and talking to other people, do you find that sometimes is the greatest limitation because we're not used to it?
Yeah, people are illiterate about the anatomy and physiology of their body. I hear people who are 38 years old describing their tummy as below their navel.
Yes.
Or people wondering which side their liver is on. Not teaching people about this incredible, miraculous livingness we embody is extremely disempowering. It's a kind of illiteracy. And with herbal medicine, a lot of people think herbal medicine is about plants, but I always say it's the relationship between the plants and the body, the plant and the biome. Plants are responding to the body and the body's responding to the plants. And the biome is also responding to the body and the plant. So it's kind of a three-way play.
of everything working together.
Yeah, and supporting each other. It's a very kind of supportive medicine. It's not an anti-medicine, really.
Yeah, and that's the branding that they do when they don't want people to have their own access, right?
Well, anti-inflammatory, anti-spasmodic, all these antibiotics. It's not really an anti-medicine. It's more like a support medicine. It's more like a let's strengthen this. Let's bring this to resolution as opposed to shutting off,
I often hear the difference between modern medicine and herbalism is modern medicine is like a spear or a knife trying to cut away a problem, whereas herbalism is more of a feminine energy where it recognizes the cycles of the human body and the natural interconnection and tries to bring you back to a homeostasis, right?
Yeah, the whole idea of heal and cure, what's that relationship? There's a lot of things. That's how I see plants, is there's a relationship between, this is my new book actually.
Oh, good.
That relationship.
We're already
yeah,
starting.
so I'm sort of like all of like that. I'm thinking about that a lot these days.
Do you think of yourself more as an herbalist first, or have you always been a writer?
Probably both.
Because you're such a good writer. Like, if people don't appreciate who don't study writing, that being able to write a story that doesn't make you get bored. A lot of people write.
Yeah.
And it's like, please don't.
But your book has such a natural flow to it.
So you just write.
Yeah, I just write.
And I guess we should mention how the vessel was inspired by a dream, and which is love and dream interpretation as a form of divination.
Yeah, so that's another reason why I'm probably a witch, is because of I'm always in dream work.
Speaking of divinatory dreams, I'd love to hear about your witch gifts. I have this sort of belief that all women have a sort of witch gift that's part of who they are. I don't know if that's something that speaks to you.
I have a few.
Okay. I was going to say you're studied, so I hope you...
Yeah, I probably have a few.
With the herbalism or with the dreams? What's your...
Well, there's the plants, working with plants. And then there's dreams. And then there's ancestors. I work a lot with ancestors.
Do you? Okay. And your family ancestors, or more like on a bigger scale?
It depends on what I'm doing.
This is stuff witches love to hear about.
I know it. So I know I'm pretty cagey about it all, right?
That's okay.
I don't.
That's how witches avoid being burned, because they don't
talk
about it.
Yeah, I'm pretty cagey, and I pull it out when I need it. These are my tools, right? So, and I think that, and this is my personal opinion. The writing process is very magical for me, in that I don't see myself writing these stories in some ways. I see them, they arrive, and I write them. With plants, it's the same way. With dreams, it's the same way. I'm more like a vessel.
I was going to say, you're birthing these things.
Yeah, I'm more like a vessel. And I don't feel comfortable taking credit for these things because I don't think they belong to me. They're like gifts that I receive, and then gifts are for giving. And when I give a gift, if I say I gave you one of my cactus, I wouldn't go, oh yeah, I gave Rose this really nice cactus. I wouldn't do that. That's
it takes away from the gift.
It takes away from the gift, right? Unless it's for the benefit of another, I don't find a lot of value in talking about my inner processes. I prefer working in a circle. Someone at the front of the room and no one else having the ability to actually connect with another person than the person at the front of the room. And circles are much more difficult to work with in many ways, right? The circle energy, then everybody has a voice as opposed to one singular voice. I think that's much greater value.
Because it'll apply to more people.
It will apply to more, my words are my words, and some people will connect with them and some people won't. Someone may be presenting the same principle or idea or gift, but they have a different language, or different metaphors, so it will connect with someone else, right? So I don't know. I think working in circle is much better than having the person in the front saying, oh, I'm the one who knows.
I think it definitely helps evolve things better, because now it's a group evolving it as compared to one person. Right?
Yeah. And, plants are so interesting because they're so complex. And the other day I was teaching, and a woman from Eastern Europe was talking about how I was teaching about time as medicine. She said that in Slovakia, it's called mother's breath. And it's so beautiful, And if I wasn't teaching in circle, I wouldn't have learned that. And then it creates kind of this magical connection between me and this woman because she gifted me with something that's so beautiful.
And every time you see time, you
Yeah,
have that connection.
Yeah, and my heart just goes, whoa. And so she gifted me with something, and I can gift her back.
Yeah, that's so much back to the how women share knowledge, right? Of the passing it on. I found it interesting in the book because you talked about how, because women were sort of removed from the ability to share their knowledge long ago, men tended to take the knowledge and kind of make it their own as if they were the experts. When you're going through some of the older herbal books, do you find it feels cut off, or like they maybe lost some of the knowledge that we had?
Oh, they totally lost. They edited it, like control of a woman's uterus has been going on for a very long time. And so a lot of that information has been edited out, but you can still find it. But the beautiful thing too about like today's herbal medicine, the phytotherapy, like looking at the chemistry of the plants, which we can do sort of now, like there's
better than before.
There's still a lot of challenges there, but is like you can go, oh, look at this is here and this is here, like this volatile oil is here, this volatile oil's in this plant and this plant, and then oh, let's look at the history of this group of plants that are all making a similar chemistry. Oh yeah, and then you start linking it up, right? You can go from the present knowledge of the plants and kind of wind your way back,
like a weaving, like your
like your other book, twisting and bending. That's what I do,
putting everything together. I love that. Do you have a herb that is your favorite right now? I know most herbalists I talk to have one that kind of comes to them for a time, and then but you've done this for a while, so
I have lots of favorite herbs. Today, I woke up this morning with a sore throat, bit of a chest thing going on. So today I would say my favorite herb is sage, like our garden sage, Salvia officinalis, because it's like my favorite for like clearing up chest things, like when you first catch them. Lots of sage today, and peppermint and elderflower. Those are my 3 herbs today. Just like boom, down in it. And honey.
And honey, yes. We were talking about bees earlier. In the book, it was interesting because you get to discuss a lot of different herbs. But what was most interesting to me was the fact that when it comes to contraception and preventing pregnancy, different herbs work at different times.
Yeah.
Which is similar to what you were just saying with your cold. It's like you have to be aware of your body systems.
Yeah, because the plants are relating to your body.
In different ways.
In that time, right? Like in that moment. And a woman's body like changes. That first 2 weeks of after conception, the bleeding's supposed to happen. That 2 weeks is a completely different biochemistry than right before a woman's going into labor. And her experience is completely different of the world as well. Like right after women bleed, it depends on the woman, we all have our cycles, but between finishing the bleed and ovulation, that's often a very different experience of body world for a woman than after ovulation and before she bleeds. Any woman knows
that their body's changing all the time.
That their body's changing and their mind is changing and their relationships are changing as everything changes. Like everything changes, right? Like our relationship with food changes, our relationship with sleep changes. And, as you go through the different, I think it's like a 10-year, we also live in 10-year cycles. So there's that like 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 50 to 60. And each of those cycles is another kind of cycling of the body. And yeah. But I'll tell you one thing that I've really been thinking a lot about. Like the problem with writing a book is once it's finished, but
more ideas keep coming.
Stuff keeps coming. So I've been thinking about like sperm is generated over a 2-month cycle. So sperm carries now. So what a man's doing, like if he's smoking lots of cannabis for a weekend, he's just stoned all weekend or something, that's going to affect the sperm in 2 months, right? Cannabis you could use as a mild contraceptive for men. That will affect the sperm in 2 months. His sperm will be a little more confused. They won't be so like motivated. So the male gamete, the male sperm carries today's information, today's knowledge, and that brings today to the new consciousness that's being birthed, right?
Yeah.
Whereas a woman, her eggs are formed while the DNA that sequences for the new consciousness is formed while her mother is in her mother, is being gestated, right?
It carries on from a way further
For
back.
the egg that formed me from my mother was made while my mom was in my grandmother, formed, her body was weaving her.
Yeah.
And so the female egg carries the past.
The collective consciousness from that
like there's
experience.
more of a deeper, pulling forward the past, whereas the male is very much now, right? So if you just look at like those two kind of relationships with time and knowledge, and can just see that in terms of the circle. Are we going to work in a circle, or are we going to have someone sitting in the front and everybody facing them, and all you see is everybody's back of their heads?
Yeah. When you're working with people and healing them, do you notice that energy in women where it feels like they carry that past with them a lot stronger?
Well, I think that's pretty much human. Like with the ancestors, with men are much more immediate, I find. Like they're kind of like, but sometimes I work with men who are really powerful. Like they know they're carrying something from the past, and they're working towards transforming it. Yeah, for sure. I think both men and women, and I think it's just a different kind of history, But actually, formation of that new life, those two pieces, the distance past and the present, they come together.
Yeah.
That's like ancestral, like how. Yeah, I've just been thinking about that, and I wish I had written about that.
I mean, but you hit on so many interesting topics. I don't think anyone will read the book and feel like they're missing anything.
That's a really important piece.
True.
Maybe I should just write a blog on it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard because it's nice to have everything in one place. Like what I love about your book is that it's like, if I have a question about it now, I just have to open it up and I'm like, oh, it's all here. And
it's also a resource book, right?
Yes, exactly. While being interesting to read, because most of the resource ones are not that fun. No offense to the resource books.
You can only read so many plant monographs, right?
That's true. Yeah, herbalism books sometimes get a little dry.
Interesting. Wow.
I was going to ask, did you mention in the book? I couldn't find it again because I read it through once for enjoyment and then went back to find things. Did you say you have bloodlines back through the witch trials in Essex? Did you?
No, but I have the old ancestry.com thing.
Yeah.
I have quite a bit of family that comes out of Essex.
Oh, okay.
So I can't say that, yes, this is, but it's that was where most of the witch trial, there were like, I can't remember the statistics, but there was a very large number of women hung in Essex during the 1500s. Yeah.
Okay.
It was one of the main centers for. Yeah, terrible, eh? Like.
Well, I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about your theory about the cause of the witch trials. I know in the stories you talked about, they loved in the trials to make these big things about talking dogs and the devil and stuff like that.
It's just craziness,
But I have trouble believing that they would kill that many people over talking dogs. So I'd love to hear your theory
or cats.
on it.
Well, I really have to credit an economist. Her name is, it's in the book here somewhere, Silvia Federico, her name is. She's an American-Italian economist. And I feel like that statement they use in U.S. politics. It's about the economy, stupid. And so her theory, which I think, this is really interesting. Yeah, there's the Reformation, and there's Catholics wanting to be closer to God than Protestants, so let's kill more women type of thing. There's all this crazy, there's, misogyny, straight up misogyny. I think it was driven by economics, basically. What happened was the plague. The witch hunts probably came together, a variety of different things kind of coalesced to create them. And they had been burning people in Europe and the UK for a very long time. Like that was a standard form of punishment, to burn people. But the specific witch hunts really revved up after the plague. And plague had killed so many people that the landowners discovered that it wasn't enough just to own land. You needed people to work the land. And there weren't people to work the land. And so women were controlling their reproductive health with plants. And the women who carried that knowledge and shared that knowledge weren't welcome anymore because they needed labor. They needed people to work the land. Wild land has no value. And we still see that today, right? Like people going after mineral rights inside our national parks, stuff like that, right? Because that wild land has no value.
And they can never leave anything empty. We're always building complexes or something everywhere.
Yeah.
Expanding.
Yeah. Or you see a piece of land regenerating. It's like, oh, look at that mess.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, well, no, actually, that's not a mess. That's like nature, that's earth healing itself. So they needed people. So they needed women to have children. Demonize the women who carry knowledge of reproductive health, how to care for a woman's health. Demonize them, demonize their plants, change the names of the plants.
Did they change a lot of names of plants?
Oh, yeah. Like wild carrot is the one I really use a lot as an example, and it was called Bishop's Seed or Bishop's Nest. Yeah, it's kind of a very dark history, that. And it's in the weaving. I don't know if I want to go into that right now, but yeah, they changed the names because if you change the name of something, it's harder to transmit that oral history.
It loses
People
that
become
connection.
Confused about what plant you're talking about.
Which is a challenge in herbalism too, because that's why we try to stick to the scientific names, right?
Yeah, why we use the botanical names.
Yeah.
But even the botanical names aren't necessarily related to the plant. Like, for example, there's a West Coast plant called Osha, very similar to Angelica, and it's at risk. And Osha in West Coast First Nations languages means bear. It's bear root. Angelica is also a bear root. I write about this in the weaving. Anyways, when some Italian botanist discovered Osha. Yeah, in air quotes, he named it Ligusticum Portia, and Ligusticum is his hometown, and Portia is his last name. Here's this amazing medicine that grows in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, and they totally wiped out the whole history of that plant and the knowledge base of its relationship with bear. It's gone. They changed the name of it.
Because they wanted to put their stamp on it.
Yeah, so now herbalists are like, oh, let's use these botanical names. Oh, it kind of sounds like Harry Potter, where actually it's just a form of colonization.
That's interesting. I haven't considered that concept. Then that's the challenge, is if we're not spreading the knowledge from word of mouth where someone's teaching someone else, then we get lost in this way of how do we figure out what something is? Because
that's right.
Even with foraging, I know I always think about the fact that people think wild ginger is store-bought ginger, and they're completely different plants. And I always kind of laugh because my sister works for the police, and she says during the fall or something, there's always this sudden spat of people poisoning themselves with mushrooms. They're trying to forage and they don't know what they're doing. And it's good that everyone's gaining this knowledge and paying interest to these things. Yeah. But the challenge is that we tend to do everything a little bit like cowboys.
Yeah.
And we're all running around the woods eating stuff.
Yeah.
And then instead of reading books, taking the time to gain the knowledge. Anyways, it's frustrating.
And also but this goes back to it as book knowledge as opposed to an oral history, a hands-on knowledge. So really what you want to do is go into the woods where you're going to forage and sit once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week in that area for like 3 or 4 hours. And just watch that area, learn about the land there, learn about those trees, learn about the plants, learn what other animals are there, what stresses those plants are under, what's abundant, how you can make that environment better, and so that the earth is teaching you herbal medicine. And it's not a book. Like the books are useful. Like I write books. Obviously, I like books. But the books aren't the plant.
Yeah, they're just the information.
There's some information that human beings are capable of gathering, and our perception bases are narrow. So the book isn't the plant. And that's really important. And the book also can't define your personal relationship with the plant.
And how it'll react with you.
Yeah, what your personal... And on all the levels, I encourage gardens because that is just such a profound way to learn plants.
To understand how they work. I find it interesting that you said that because for myself, when I forage, one of the things I always do is smell the plant so that I start developing the awareness of what it smells like so that I know what it is for sure because I know it always smells that way. But I know some herbalists will speak about how they get frustrated with the pill method of taking herbs.
Oh, yeah.
because there's no sensory experience.
Yeah.
How the medicine works is your body needs to react in a sensory way, especially when I think of things like motherwort, right? Which has this horrible taste.
Yeah, it's pretty bitter.
But it's almost like we've put ourselves in so much bubble wrap. No one wants to experience anything anymore, and we've cut ourselves off.
Well, it's hard to put them in their bodies.
Mm.
Like they're just not in their bodies, and how to feel the body's relationship with the plant. These are ancient relationships. Like 4 billion years ago, this single cell organism appeared called I don't know if I'll say this right, but an archaea. And it's closer to our cells than anything else. But it's also closer to plants, fungi, all animals, right? And then somehow a bacteria got inside that archaea and became mitochondria. And because of that relationship between the archaea, this microbe, and this other microbe, this bacteria, every multicellular life form on this planet evolved. Those two cells coming together, those two single cell organisms. That knowledge is in our DNA. And that knowledge is like in our mitochondria DNA as well. But it's also, that means that pine tree came from those, there's a big white pine right outside my kitchen window. That big white pine came out of those two cells just as I did.
So you have just as much relationship to them as
so we're
else.
like all relatives, And when you take a plant inside, this has been happening for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And our body is designed to live with plants and microbes and understand. So it's like if one can get inside your body in a really deep way, and take a plant like this medicine I'm taking today, right? Like my whole chest is now warm, right? My throat isn't as croaky. Yeah. Every once in a while I kind of feel this little flush happen as my blood vessels open up, which is another part of this medicine. My mind's a little clearer because of the peppermint. We're in relationship. Definitely capsules are like, but sometimes, you just have to work with the person who's in front of you. And
yeah, I think for me being a nurse, it's always challenging to look at modern medicine versus, I want to say traditional medicine. Yeah, just because it's been so stigmatized that you almost know the minute you say something, unless someone's already in that inclination, that they're going to shut down, right?
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, so you work in a clinic as well.
Yeah.
Do you find it's hard to get people to be receptive to your practice sometimes? Or are they ready for it by the time they get to you?
Okay, I never offer advice unless I'm asked. Yeah, so that's kind of like that's guarding my medicine, right? I don't offer advice unless I'm asked on any level. I guard my medicine, right?
I think that's really smart. Is there an herb that you thought spoke to you the most when it came to these natural contraceptives? Or you said wild carrot, because I know you talk about it a lot in the book. Is that the one that comes up the most for you because it's local?
I love violet. It's like so like, when I learned violet was a contraceptive, I was just like, whoa, it's and it has the whole heart-shaped leaf and it's kind of like, likes to grow in the shade and it's not really an out there plant. I love the violet. But rose petals, you could say, would be a contraceptive as well because they're septic, so they contract blood vessels. You can use rose petals to stop heavy bleeding.
Oh, really?
It's one of the plants you can use to help reduce bleeding, right? If you can contract those blood vessels in the uterus, right? These are all love spell plants,
Yeah, it was amazing to find that out because we just don't know any of that anymore. Like, I was thinking about the whole fact that we kind of think of managing contraception as like a daily pill.
Yeah.
That's the way we're trained. But when you talk in the book, you talk more about how it's almost like after the fact. Do you think we should be using the herbs like the pill where we're taking all the time, or more becoming aware of our cycles enough and then knowing this is the time we need to take these herbs?
Well, if you have sex during ovulation,
yeah,
that's when you're going to get pregnant, right? And that's like a 3-5 day window. So I don't know why you would take medicine all the time. That's one of the big paradigm shifts between herbal medicine and the industrial medical complex, which I call it. And so the industrial medical complex, it teaches us that we have to take our medicine all the time. Like if you have asthma, you have to use your puffer every day, whether it's the kind of day you're going to have an asthma attack or not, right? Or yes, you're going to have to stay on that prednisone the rest of your life because we can't get this inflammation under control. or the birth control pill or your high blood pressure medication or whatever it is, tamoxifen, after breast cancer. You have to take these drugs the rest of your life. There is no cure in Western medicine. There is like long-term drug use. In herbal medicine, it's not like that. It's like you use the medicine when you need the medicine. When you don't need the medicine, you don't use the medicine.
And I assume that's the hardest part to translate to people who are used to, give me a pill, I don't want to think about it, I just want to keep putting it in my body.
Yeah, because the relationship between the plant and the body mind complex is very different with plants. The plants are so complex, and the complexity in the body, neither of which have really been unraveled. And this relationship is very old. I'm talking billions of years old. The trick is to know your cycle. If you have sex when you're ovulating, or if he's really virile, get him really stoned before you have sex. If you slow him down a little bit, right? And, because a really good sperm will live for about 5 days. So that's the tricky piece. The early signs of pregnancy, like missing your period is not the first sign of pregnancy. There's about 6 signs. The first one is usually tender breasts.
Yeah, and you went over a lot of this.
It's all in the book. And day 6 of implantation, that's the day you want to use your herbs before implantation. So, and if you experience implantation, up the dose of your herbs, If you're not having sex during ovulation, why do you need contraception?
Yeah. No, and it's so interesting to me because when I was reading the book, of course, raised in modern medicine, my brain's just like, but what do I take every day? What is my, like, I'm just picturing how much herb you would need to find for.
That's right.
And I know that's part of one of the messages in your books too, is it seems like the minute modern medicine gets a hold of a herb, it takes it all. And then there's
the whole
left.
forest.
Yeah. And then we're stuck using,
And the people are left impoverished. And that knowledge is lost. The knowledge of that jungle is lost.
Yeah.
The medicine in that jungle is lost.
Because, we've just taken it all away.
Yeah, the jungle's gone and the people are displaced. It's also happened, though, with farming practices for growing plants for essential oils in Ecuador.
Okay.
Like cheap land was bought, jungles were cut down, and lavender was planted.
Yeah. And that's something to be said about the awareness of where you're buying from.
Yeah.
And where you're getting your resources.
Yeah, so you can grow a lot of contraceptive herbs in your garden.
That was one of the interesting things about your book, is that you find out that every country has their own thing.
Every country has their own. Every landscape. The earth loves women. It just comes down to that.
It's just out there to help us.
Yeah, like the earth loves women and will tend to women and take care of women, and every continent, every kind of landscape, deserts, jungles, beaches, boreal forests, they all have contraceptive herbs.
Yeah. So I mean, everyone has access if they're willing to go find it.
Yeah.
I know when I read your book, the first thing I said was, I have to go find the wild carrot.
Yeah. There was a lot of wild carrot this year.
I know. That is definitely our herb. Is there anything else you want me to ask you before we're done?
Can I read a little bit?
I would love if you would read a little.
In the early 1900s, the Lower East Side was chaotic, cramped, noisy, and muddy. On every corner, down every alley, in every tenement, there was the stench of poverty. Smells from faraway places, sour cabbage and garlic, overwhelmed the stink of horse manure. Waves of immigrant fleeing starvation in Ireland, pogroms in Eastern Europe, and landlessness in Italy packed the tenement buildings. Fire or dirty water was a more likely cause of death on the Lower East Side than a heart attack or cancer. Photojournalist Jacob Rees documented the lives of people living on the Lower East Side in the early 1900s. I have found in 3 rooms father, mother, 12 children, and 6 boarders. They sleep on the half-made clothing for beds. I found that several people slept in a subcellar floor 4 feet by 6 on a pile of clothing that was being made. Margaret, in her crisp white nurse's uniform and sensible shoes, her black nurse bag tucked under her arm, valiantly dodged pushcarts stuck in mud and brushed off huskers peddling pots and pans, handmade toys and pickles. She marched down an alley where threadbare sheets hung to dry overhead, and children slept a tangle of thin arms and legs in stairwells. Margaret, without pausing for a breath, climbed a dank staircase past a girl leaning against a closed door, rocking an infant in her lap. A man moaned behind the door while the girl's mother earned money for their bread. Margaret carried on down the hall to the sound of a woman berating a child for spilling milk. At the end of the hall, Margaret, without knocking, threw open the last door and stepped into the 2-room apartment. In the apartment was Margaret's patient, a woman curled up on a bed of rags, hemorrhaging thick clots of blood. The woman's children sobbed in the corner while the eldest daughter, a girl of 12, pressed a damp cloth to her mother's forehead. The breath of whiskey lingered in the air. In the Lower East Side, Margaret tended to lives destroyed by back alley abortions. Later in life, Margaret wrote and spoke about her experiences caring for women drowning in poverty's pools of despair. Margaret credited the women drained, dried out, done in by pregnancy after pregnancy with inspiring her vision for universal birth control. The woman's plight, their desperate need for reliable contraception, burned inside Margaret and fueled her crusade to reverse the Comsac Act that outlawed contraception in America. In her autobiography, Margaret wrote, I associated poverty, toil, unemployment, drunkenness, cruelty, quarreling, fighting, debts, jail with large families.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Abrah. Anyone interested in learning more about Abrah's work should check out her website, abraherbs.com. We'll put the link in the show notes. As well, be sure to check out her latest book, The Vessel, Women, Plants, and Contraception, on Amazon. And if you want to hear more interesting content like this, please follow us at greatnorthwitches.com.
Bubbles, dark basement, scuttles, fingernails.